Welcome to another episode coming at you from ChooseYourRelationships.com, author of Love Can't Wait, which can be found on Amazon.com. Yes, sir, it's official. So in this interview, I did an interview with Dylan Roos. He's a master NLP masculinity coach for men. And it was a good interview. But the only thing that and this was my fault, the audio was a little off. It was a great interview, but the audio was a little off. So bear with me with this interview. It's a good interview, but the audio was a little off. But I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think. Like, share this episode. Tell me what you think below. And if you're following me on the podcast, leave your emails and comments within the show notes. Or if you want to send me an email, just send your email at renegademoney@gmail.com. That's renegademoney@gmail.com. So enjoy this episode. Again, like I said, the audio was a little off, but other than that, we had a great conversation. So until next time, I'm out. Peace.
Now that I'm seeing is the rise in mental illness. So a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of that, from my perspective, is a real lack of two things: a lack of self-confidence in being like sure of themselves, which is common for all of us. Like that is the age when you are unsure, is the teenagehood. You're like, oh, who am I? What do I stand for? But it's kind of gone to another level I'm seeing in this next generation or these younger kids, is this lack of assurance of who they are. And so there's that piece, and there's also something that's shifted I've noticed, because as I said, I worked with men 35 plus. I'm 28, and then I work with, young men 23 and below. And one thing that I'm sure you've probably noticed as well with speaking to guests and the work that you do is, with such a push on mental health the last
So where you from originally?
So originally Sydney, Australia. That's where I grew up. And right now I'm in Hawaii. So I moved to Hawaii at the start of the year with my partner.
Oh, that's cool, man. So, I've been to Sydney and Perth.
Yep.
In the 90s. I used to be in the Navy, man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So what's it like growing up in Sydney?
What's it like growing up in Sydney? I'm pretty fortunate so my mum's from California, and so I've been out to the States, once a year my entire life, and I'm an American citizen. So I'll try to give you like the differences, I guess, that I've picked up. Well, first of all, there's just not that many people. I'm not sure what the population is in North Carolina, but the whole of Australia is 27 million people. And to give you reference, California has 30 million people. So it's not as busy, I guess you would say. And growing up, man, that's a good question. Growing up, I would say the main differences I saw were more cultural differences. Australia's pretty similar in that we emulate a lot of America, but I would say we're 5 or 10 years behind, and so it wasn't too different. More our language, our slang, that's definitely different. But I loved growing up in Australia. I had a very family orientated upbringing. My parents are still together, went to a really good school, fortunate enough to travel extensively, and so really loved my upbringing in Sydney. But every time I came out to America, it was like, oh man, I want to move to America. I love it here. So I finally did at the start of this year, and I'm loving it.
Oh, see, that's the same thing I said about Australia. I, there's
It's
a
a
lot.
beautiful country.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I only been to Perth and Sydney and Gold Coast. I've been there
Yep.
areas too, so there's a lot of similarities, and a lot of cities and towns over there are very similar to being here in North America, I would say.
Yeah. I say when I try to explain, I say Sydney's similar to Los Angeles, and then I say Melbourne is similar to New York, and then I kind of like I say Sydney's similar to LA in the people and the lifestyle. Like, they're a bit, especially where I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. It's very LA like in terms of who are you, what can you do for me, that kind of mentality, and that's where I grew up. So I'm used to it, and I do like LA. But that's very much Sydney and the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And then Melbourne is similar to New York I feel like the energy of Melbourne's similar to New York.
Yeah,
New York, like the city's pretty. Not the cities aren't even really that similar, but I feel like Melbourne is really good coffee, really good food, fast. Again, fast paced, but the people, and this is where it's probably not similar to New York in my experience, but the people in Melbourne are much nicer than the people in Sydney.
oh,
They're
yeah.
so much nicer.
Oh, for sure, I agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Hawaii?
I love Hawaii, man. It's a good halfway point for me growing up. So it's like a 9-hour flight from Sydney, 5 hours from California. So I love Hawaii. Good beaches, good weather. Yeah, man, it's great.
So how did you get started? Teaching guys, dating, and everything. Because I know this is not like the typical route that we don't go to school for this. So
No.
how did you get started?
How did I get started? So about 4 years ago, me and my dad we went to a yoga event that my girlfriend at the time put on, and it would have been like 50, 60 people, and me and my dad were like the only two guys in the room. It was just a room full of women. And we kind of had this moment where we looked around and we said, why aren't men taking better care of themselves? Why aren't they like looking after, we hear the buzzword mindfulness these days. And my mum's a meditation teacher. And so I'd always had a pretty good grasp of looking after my mental health. And so from there, as I said, 4 or 5 years ago, we started a company in Australia where we focus on events-based business where we put on events for CEOs, managers, male CEOs and managers, and we really challenge them on their wellness habits whilst still including, the business, the networking, the leadership aspect of it. And so our first event was a 60 person breakfast, a 60 male breakfast, and we did meditation, yoga, and had a couple speakers. So that's kind of what started me off in this, I guess, men's space. And then from there, I just got more and more niche. I started another business where I challenged and championed men to be better, and we worked with men 30 to 45. And then in my personal business, I niched down even more. I'm only 28 years old, and I niched down even more and went, you know what, I really want to mentor young men. I really want to help young men 14 to 23, 24, 25, that really interesting age where we expect so much of our young men, but no one, you mentioned you don't learn this stuff in school. No one's teaching our young men about leadership, about how to treat women, about emotional intelligence, emotional health, resilience, how to create good habits, how to break out of bad habits. So all of that sort of stuff. And so I came up with my Prince to King program where it was like, what did I need at 14? What did I need at 18? What was I missing from my life? And how can I put together a program specifically for that young man that is looking to improve his life and is looking to, get better and become a better version of himself?
Yeah, man. I saw you took a couple pictures. It looked like it was in school, students.
Yeah.
How did you have the idea to go that route? Because that's very unusual.
Yeah. Speaking to students.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked at my own experiences. I looked at what. So when I was 18 years old and I left high school. I grew up playing sport, and in Australia, my dad's a really famous athlete and coach in Australia. So I just always thought, oh, I'm probably going to play sport. I'll probably just do that. And I was fairly good at it. And then I got to 18. In our system in Australia, that's the draft age. There's no college system that allows athletes to develop 18, 19, 20, 21 and then get drafted. It's just 18 draft year, you miss out, and it's very unlikely that you'll get drafted as a top age. They call them a top age recruit. And so I didn't get drafted, and I was stuck at 18, 19 with that massive question of like, well, fuck, what am I going to do with my life? I actually don't know. And so navigating those few years of uncertainty, or not even a few years, but like from 18 to 24, 25, when I found out my purpose and I discovered what I wanted to do with my life, it was really tough. And it was, like I talk about it, it's like a maze for me, like I was going down dead ends and I was making mistakes and I was doing all these things that what my goal with my program is to turn that maze into a labyrinth, and more like there is kind of one path, and I'm here helping you go down that path, and eventually you'll find yourself to the center of the labyrinth with the help of my mentoring, instead of having to go down too many wrong dead end paths like the maze. And so that experience really shaped me and really drove my desire to get into schools, because I'm a massive believer of preventative approach. Like, how can I prevent your pain? How can I prevent your struggle? How can I prevent you from making dumb decisions? Those sorts of questions is what I'm really interested in. And then when I was 20 years old, I went through a really bad breakup with my girlfriend at the time, and that caused me, long story short, just to push everything down. Didn't want to deal with my emotions, didn't want to deal with the pain I felt post the breakup. And so 6 months of just drinking, partying, eating shitty food, not working out, not meditating, I found myself unable to get out of bed for a week. And that's when at 20 years old, I was like, okay, this isn't a hangover anymore. There's something wrong here. So I put my hand up, went to see a psychologist, and that's when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And so those two, key moments in my life really drive me to want to help young people or young men. And then that led to, well, where are they? Well, they're in schools. So let me get into schools and let me get them, as young as I can. Year 5, year 6 is as young as I go, and then all the way up through high school.
That's great, man. So what are some of the biggest problems that a lot of young boys have?
I would say the biggest thing now that I'm seeing is the rise in mental illness. So a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of that, from my perspective, is a real lack of two things: a lack of self-confidence in being like sure of themselves, which is common for all of us. Like, that is the age when you are unsure, is the teenagehood. You're like, oh, who am I? What do I stand for? But it's kind of gone to another level I'm seeing in this next generation, or these younger kids, is this lack of assurance of who they are. And so there's that piece, and there's also something that's shifted, I've noticed, because as I said, I worked with men 35 plus, I'm 28, and then I work with young men 23 and below. And one thing that I'm sure you've probably noticed as well with speaking to guests and the work that you do is, with such a push on mental health the last 10, 20 years, this massive focus on like your feelings, and your feelings are so important, and talk about your feelings, and this real rise in the conversation, which has been great and definitely necessary, especially for men. What it has done is it's demonized resilience a bit in it's demonized masculinity, and that's kind of a different topic. But masculinity's been just like, that's the worst thing you can be. The worst thing you can be is a white straight male, right? Like, that is, so I'm the devil. I'm a white straight male. I'm the worst thing you can be in today's society. But because we really demonized masculinity, and we've demonized and I never use this term, but for your listeners, toxic masculinity, because we've really and whatever's associated with that, I've seen a real drop in resilience and grit in our young people. And so where, our fathers had the real mentality of like just get shit done and suck it up. And whilst I don't push that mentality of like suck it up, because I don't think that's the right way, but we've gone too far the other way now. So we've gone like, it's no longer suck it up. Now it's, you don't feel good today? Okay, well, why don't we stay at home and not go to school, or let me take care of you, or whatever, instead of like, okay, let's explore that. Like, why don't you feel good? But, you know, bud, you have to go to school, you know, or you've got responsibilities, you've got commitments, and it is important to develop some resilience. And so that's really what I'm noticing. And those two things really go hand in hand.
Yeah, man. I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago, and we're having a conversation about just masculinity and toxic masculinity, because you know they throw that phrase around a lot within the mainstream media, and you know I listened to what toxic masculinity mean to them, and I said, well, basically, that's, you know, based on what I saw when I was growing up. You know, my grandfather and my dad, they were a man's man.
Yeah.
Like, hey, just take charge, get it done, and we'll talk about whatever happens later, right? But today it seems like that guy, like your dad or your grandfather, there's no space for that guy in society. That guy is not needed anymore. You know? So what happens a lot of times is the young people see that, okay, this guy, he's passive, he's docile, he's silly acting, he's not assertive. And, you know, this is what they see on television. So, and in the workplace, or even maybe in school, so they emulate that way of being because that's all they see.
Yeah.
So,
and I've got a bunch of friends that I was spending a lot of time with last year when I came out to Hawaii for about 6 months last year, and I was hanging out with a lot of college students because I had a mate that was in college, and then so I was hanging out with a lot of college students, and the number one thing that the college girls were saying, like all of them, they were like why I want this guy to take, like, I want him to be a man, I want him to like take charge, I want him to like ask me out and like do these things that, for at least for me, and I kind of look at myself as like the last generation, I'm 28, last generation that got that okay from society to be a man. And then below that, mate, and then it was kind of like, no, you don't be a man, that's not a good thing to be. So I speak to these girls and they're like, yeah, I want him to like take me out, I want him to take care of me, and I want him to like do these things that for me and for you it's like, well, yeah, that's what I was brought up on. So guys aren't doing that anymore. And they're like, no, if we're messaging, they'll be like real. I say, I talk about it being like flaccid, you know, like it's like, man, you're being fucking flaccid. And they're like, yeah, if you want to hang out, like maybe, like cool, like okay, like, and they're like, I want you to want to hang out with me, and I want you to be like, hey, this is what we're doing. And so, but the media and everything else will tell you it's the opposite. Women want feminized men, and they want, you know, you to, you know, really sway with the female's desires, etc. And it's like, I look at it now and I go, anything that the mainstream media is telling you, just do the opposite. Just do the opposite.
There you go. Because, yeah, and I've heard what you just explained. I've heard this type of talk from hundreds of women. But I say, hey, you say, I heard what you said, but you don't respond to the guy. You don't gravitate towards the guy. You complain about what he ain't doing or what you want. So there's a difference between what she says and what she's attracted to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see this everywhere. This is the thing. There's so much evidence to support what you just said. Like, why are the assholes, like, why are the fuck boys, why are they getting all the women, you know? And it's not, and I'm really careful of my words here, because my message isn't be an asshole and be a fuckboy. That's not my message. But my message is, what are the traits that the fuck you don't mind if I'm swearing on your podcast, do you?
Go ahead, man.
Okay, cool. So what are the traits that the asshole and the fuckboy, what do they represent to the feminine, and what they represent are they are these traits that women do gravitate towards, like assertiveness, like, hey, what does an asshole do? He doesn't have a lot of time for the girl. Yeah, and that is really attractive to the feminine because what it says is, oh, you've got other things other than me going on in your life. Oh, that's attractive to me. And so it's being wrongly disposed of by the assholes, but there's a lot to take out of it. So when I'm mentoring my young men and I'm talking to them about women and the dating game and all this, it's like, nice, you want to be a kind man, you don't want to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
And that's really important. So you still want to be like integrity driven, respectful, like, heart led man, but you don't want to be this nice guy. No one wants to date a nice guy, right? But again, to your point, like, women will say, we want you to open up, we want you to be vulnerable, we want you to be the nice guy, we want all these things. And then when you start to do it, it's like instantly unattractive to the feminine, instantly. Yeah. And so I'm as I'm getting, more developed in this space, and as I'm reading more, learning more, doing more podcasts, speaking more, it's like, it's really important for boys and men to listen and emulate men on what it means to be a man. And I think that's not to say just ignore anything women say. It's not that, but it's just men need to step up and teach boys how to be men. That's the role. That's the rites of passage. That's what we did for thousands of years, was the elders took the boys away and did a rites of passage, and then you came back a man. It wasn't the women taking the boys and getting them out and showing, here, this is how we want you to treat us. No, the men passed down their knowledge and passed down what it meant to be a man. And so I think that's really lost in our modern culture.
Yeah, I always say, take what women say with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that most women, it don't matter her age, they really don't know what they want. And if they do say what they want, it could change.
Have you read Way of the Superior Man?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about it throughout that whole book, right? And it's not because and we have to be, we got to be so careful what we're talking about, but it's the feminine trait. The feminine is nature. The feminine is chaos. The feminine is flowing. And so when I'm speaking to a man and a guy says something, it's really important for the masculine to be a man of his word, right? Like, that's really important, to say something and then follow up. For the feminine, it's a little bit different because they're the chaos and because they're the feminine in nature and they're flowing. What they say is just a reflection of how they feel in that moment, and that moment can change. Now I'm over here as the feminine, and so what you're saying, it's so true. It's like, and it's up to men, and I love for your listeners, like, The Way of the Superior Man, unbelievable book for men and women. Like, go read it, it's so good. And for men, it's our duty and our responsibility to step up and like penetrate with love through the feminine and really like ground the feminine and bring it back. So I think it is an interesting point that you bring up.
Yeah. So how did you know you had the confidence to even teach? Because it's one thing, some people might be good at doing one thing or living their life or playing sports or in good businessmen or whatever, but when it comes to teaching it, they're horrible.
Yeah.
How do you know you would be good at doing it?
Oh man, that's a good question. I've never even thought of that. How did I know? I think I had doubts. I think I was nervous. I think I was like, is this my right path? But I'm such a big believer of confidence being the one of, if not the most important thing you can teach young people, is confidence. And I was always really confident. Now I definitely had imposter syndrome and doubts and fears, but I've always been a pretty confident guy. And so when I took on the coaching, it was just a matter of like, this is what I'm doing. How do I do it? And the market will tell me if it's not necessary. So when I went out and I launched my program, I sold it out and I was like, oh, okay. Right. And then I sold it out and then I got 10 really good testimonials. And so I was like, oh, okay, so I can do what I'm claiming I can do. Great. Yeah. So that was, I wasn't too worried at the start about whether I could do it. It was like, this is what I'm doing, and let's see if people will gravitate towards it. And they did. And so, yeah, as I said, I had the fears, I had the doubts, but I think I just had the confidence to go and move through those doubts and those fears. And then I was fortunate enough that I was good at what I did.
Yeah, the reason why I said that, man, because there's a lot of we seen. Let's take athletes. Let's take sports, for example. Let's take somebody like Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady would be a horrible coach.
Yeah.
Not because he's not intelligent and smart and don't know the game, but I think a lot of coaches, they expect the players to play on the level that they did.
Yeah.
And a lot of players can't model that.
Yeah. It's incredibly rare to see a player go to a coach. Like, it's so Steve Kerr in basketball, like, he's done a very good job. But I give a lot of credit to the people around me, and I try to give as much credit as I can to the people around me to, like, whatever little success I've got at the moment. And I'm really fortunate. My dad was a professional athlete in Australia, and he did make the transition to a professional coach, and he is widely regarded as one of the best players and one of the best coaches in Australia for his sport. And so what he did, when he finished playing, he wrote down a list of 25 things that he liked and didn't like as a player about his coaches. And then he carried that with him through his coaching career, so that he knew, okay, here's the player's perspective. I can't lose the player's perspective. Like, this is what makes a good coach and a bad, or a good leader and a bad leader. And I think that really helped him become a good coach. But it's rare. It's really rare. Yeah. And for me, in my coaching, it's a lot of, like, I don't really claim all that much, and I'm getting more. I don't really claim to have, like, all the answers. It's not like, hey, come work with me and I've got all the answers. It's like, hey, man, you want to be a better version of yourself? Let me support you. Let me guide you. Here's some stories that I went through. Here's my mistakes. Learn what you can from me. And so I think my humility in my process has actually really helped me too. Because people, especially in Australia, we look at Americans and we're like, man, what the fuck's going on over there? Like, the salesman mentality and, like, the way you guys speak and everything. In Australia, it's like, we smell that shit. Like, we smell no motherfucker. Cut to the point. Like, no, like, salesman bullshit. It's like, no. What is it? So we really smell inauthenticity. Whereas in America, it's a little bit different. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, there's a different mentality over here.
Crazy over here, man.
Yeah.
So, how did your program, Prince to King, come together? And tell us what it's about.
Yeah. I put it together over about 12 months or so, and it's really the foundations for any young man. It's like my flagship program. So I run a course called the Prince to King, and that's a self-led course. And then I've got my Prince to King mentoring, which is the course plus one-on-one mentoring. So as you're going through the course, we jump on calls once a week or multiple times a week, and I mentor the client. And the topics that we cover are things like habits and routine, what it means to be a man, so masculinity, what it means to be a man, emotional intelligence, the importance of vulnerability, but the importance of vulnerability in regards to resilience. And then, so my program, Prince to King, I go into the King archetypes. I go into the archetype work and what that actually means, and I really simplify it for the boys because it's a pretty pretty heavy topic. And so we go into that: confidence, leadership, values, behaviors, all those sorts of things that, again, I wish I had as a young man. And I think, if you're a young man and you go through this program, you'll come out really solid with a great foundation for life, where you can go, okay, I've got a lot of tools now, I've got a lot of education and guidance around how I should be, not how I should be showing up, but how I can be showing up that's going to best benefit me.
Gotcha. So do you work with women or mainly men?
If a woman reached out to me and said, "Hey, Dylan, I'd love some coaching," I'd be like, "All right, cool, let's do it." But to date, I work only with men. Yeah, I work only with men. But I love when you reached out to have me on your podcast is the dating. Like, I love having dating conversations. Like, I love the conversation around dating and men and women. I think it's such a fascinating conversation, and I think we're really straying from what is a successful relationship, and I think that's really complicated matter, but also I think it's really simple matter as to why. But no, at this stage, no women. But any women listening, you want to work with me, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I got you, man. So if people wanted to work with you, or one-on-one, or buy any of your programs, where would they go to?
Yeah, just DylanRoosCoaching.com. So that's DYLANROOS coaching.com. And then you can follow me on Instagram too. I'm pretty big on Instagram, as in I'm not big as in I've got a lot of followers. I'm big as in I post a lot there, just to clarify. And that's Dylan.Roos, same spelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more question. Any books or any new programs in the near future?
I really want to I really want to write my own book. I'm just trying to find some time to just start doing that and get really clear on what that book would be about. But the next space that I'm going to step into is this rites of passage. So I'm really interested in the rites of passage for young men. So doing retreats, and I'm probably going to do something. I go back to Australia for a month in November, so I'll probably do a 2-3 day father-son rites of passage in Australia, and then I'll look to establish myself more in the American market in the next year or so, and get some real solid retreats and rites of passage programs going. That's what's coming up for me.
Great, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on again, just like I said earlier.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Like, share this episode. All links will be found in the show notes below. Tell me what you think about this episode. Until next time, we out. Peace. If you like this video, share this video. And if you want to support my channel, click the thanks tab and leave me a donation. 2, 5, 10, 50. Just click whatever tab you want to donate and leave me a note and let me know how the video helped you. And you click the buy and send tab. Appreciate it.